Alright guys, in today's video I'm going to go over maintenance. We're going to do 4L80E, automatic transmission maintenance. You should always change the fluid in a 4L80E every 100,000 miles, 50,000 if you're towing or you're living in a mountainous or hilly terrain area. So this is a good video and a good increment to share with you if you don't currently have the owner's manual for your old body style GM truck. We're working on a 1998 right now, and in 1998 it had a Torx type bolt, a T55. Fits in like that. Now these can get kind of stripped out over the years, especially with the amount of time we're talking about here. So what I use to get these kind out to avoid damaging them any further, just bring a jack in, bring a piece of wood, and what we'll do is we'll get this guy in here on this piece of wood. Like that, and that just gives us a little bit of upward force. We don't actually want to try to jack up anything. We just want to get some upward force so that we got good bite into this Torx bolt. Just like that. Bring our pan over here. I'm going to show you the other kind of bolt that you can encounter besides this T55. There's a more standard looking bolt, but it's still not exactly normal. And then you can also, if you've got a very early 4L80E from the early 90s, or you're working on one that's got military heritage out of a Humvee, it won't have a drain plug at all. And I'll show you how you can deal with that problem as well. So we're going to let this all drain out here, and while it's draining out, I'll go show you another truck that has the other style of drain plug. Alright guys, here's a later 4L80E, and you can see on this one we've got a standard type of hex head. It's a 15 millimeter, but it's still not a standard, right? It's a very half-high. If we zoom in, you can see it's a half-high type bolt. So even on this type, you got to be careful not use a 12-point socket, but only a 6-point socket to get it off. But this would be the AC Delco service type of drain plug. Now, if you've got the older one, like I said, that has no drain plug at all, it'll still have this indentation in the pan. You'll still have this swiggles over here where the magnet is on the other side. It'll just be, there won't be anything here, and I'll put a picture of one of those up in the upper right corner of the video for comparison. Alright guys, this is dripped down enough. We're going to put the drain plug back in. This is just a kind of a closer up view of this T55 type original one that's kind of like a dome head to it. It's got an integrated rubber gasket on the bottom. Alright, so now to get the pan off, we got 18 or so 10 millimeter bolts running around the perimeter. It's all pretty straightforward except for these ones in the back. These ones in the back come up with 3/8 hardware. What you'll see is that the rear motor mount, the rear transmission mount, is going to get in your way on being able to get a socket on these 10s that are here. And what you'll have to do is you'll have to use 1/4 inch hardware to fit in there. The other thing I'd point out to you is this particular one over here. You notice there's a hole in the frame cross member. That's there on purpose for doing this particular maintenance. You run your socket extension up through this hole. You put the socket on. And now we have access to this bolt that's here. So I'm going to go around with this breaker bar. I'm going to break the torque on all these, and then we'll zip them off, and then I'll show you which ones we leave on to deal with the case if you don't have a drain plug on your pan. You have a very early 4L80E. Alright guys, right besides this service access port here, there's also another one over here to help you get the corresponding transmission pan bolt that's right above this one. Alright guys, we're on number 17 here. I guess there's 17 of these. Breaking the torque on this last one. Alright, now we're going to switch to the electric ratchet and we're going to zip these guys off. And what I'm going to do is we'll go through as if we didn't have a drain plug. That means I'm going to leave this guy that I just loosened up here, and I'm going to leave the one that's exactly opposite on the corner down here. I'm going to leave these two on, and I'm going to take everything else off. We're going to fast forward through this because there's nothing really to see. We're just removing fasteners. All right, so if we didn't miss anything, we've gotten all these. Let's do a real quick finger check. All right, so we've just got the one in the corners. So we're going to loosen these up now. I'm not going to remove them though. Just going to make sure we got them where we can move them by hand. That one feels good. Slip this guy in without going through the hole because he's already loose now. So we don't have to. And our pan is going to let go nicely. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to bring another kind of drain apparatus into position. You can use a large basting tray as well. But we just want to have some more width to what we've got to work with here than we get with just the standard pan. Reposition the light for you guys. All right, so now if I don't have a drain plug, this guy's full of fluid. So what I'm going to do is get this where I can remove it by hand. I'm going to pull this back to completely cover the dimensions of the pan. I'm going to take this guy almost all the way out. And I'm going to start doing the same thing for the one that we had up in this corner up here. All right, so now it should be at a point where I can take them off with my finger. So push up on the pan, take this guy in the back out. Again, we're just doing this for those of you that don't have a drain plug. Obviously, we don't need to go through all these gyrations normally. Take this one off up here. Because now you've got a controlled drop, right? So normally this would be full of fluid. You'd let it down. You got to get it off of the parking cable assembly over here. And that's when it's going to start dripping out. Of course, what you don't want to do is what I just did. And I left one bolt in up here. Sorry about that, guys. Didn't see him back here. All right, so now you work him off of that parking cable assembly like this, and then you'll be able to let it drip on this corner that I'm holding, just like you see there. And now you can hold it and do a controlled drain. I know I'm blocking your view at this point, but you guys get the idea. So at this point, I'm just going to lay this guy in this oversized pan so that we can see up on top here. So a quick wipe off of any dirt on my hands, gloves. Next, we've got the filter. So this is a late style filter. There's a late style and an early style. Filter just comes off by wiggling it off. And then there's a bushing up there we have to replace as well. We'll let this drip some more, and I'll show you replacing that bushing. All right, guys, we're on the driver's side here, and here is our filter bushing right here. It's press fit into the case. The case is aluminum. The bushing is rubber-clad steel. There's a couple of ways you can remove it. If you have a blind hole puller, you can pull it in here, and you can use a slide hammer to take it out. I prefer the deform method. I'm going to deform the bushing so that we can pull it out that way. I just prefer to use a screwdriver to start, but you don't want to finish it with that because that kind of tool can be damaged, so we're just going to switch to a small 1/4 chisel now. Guys, I'm not trying to be gentle with it, but it's an awkward position I'm in because of the camera. All right, there we go. It's a little bit more awkward having the camera in the way. It doesn't normally take that long to do this. What I'm showing you here is you want to see that on the aluminum, we don't want to cause any damage to the outside or this chamfering in the middle. So now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go all around the gasket sealing surface. We're going to have to clean off all the dirt that has intruded into that, get all this cleaned off all around the perimeter, and then we'll clean the pan and check the magnet. All right, let's pull out what we've got. Get this guy over here where it can drain. Now these factory gaskets, these are completely reusable as long as they're not cracked or broken, and as long as these stainless inserts are all still secure. So that's one of the advantages of using OEM parts. Let's go ahead and dump this out. So then what we'll get going here is we'll give this a cleaning, but the most important thing you want to check right off the bat is we don't see any large chunks or slivers or pieces of obvious metal fragments sticking to the magnet. That's what we want to be looking for. What we have is this kind of dust, which is just normal wear. So we're going to brake clean this all out. Get as much of this in here as we can so it can be recycled. We'll brake clean it all out. We'll do some cosmetic cleaning on the outside. We'll clean up the gasket and reuse it, and we'll show you the new filter and installing the new bushing. All right, guys, we've got this all cleaned up. There's our original gasket. No cracks. None of the inserts are damaged or loose, so we're going to reuse this guy. We got the pan and the magnet all cleaned. You definitely want to have this magnet be here. If yours is missing, I'll leave a part number in the description so that you can order a replacement. This is the level of clean we want. On this side, we're not after as much because this is going to get dirty anyway, but we scraped off a lot of this dried up mud. There was also some oil from a previous engine oil leak that had dried up on here, so we got all that cleaned up. So we're ready to reinstall the pan and the gasket. We've also cleaned up the 17 bolts. And what we're going to be putting as far as the service package together is this GM 2421 0956, and what that is a new filter and a new bushing. So the filter's obvious how that goes in. I'll show you that in a minute, but now we got to install this new bushing to take the place of the one we took out. So we'll go back on the other side and we'll push this guy in. All right, guys, we're going to install this bushing with a 28 millimeter outer and a 19 millimeter inner. There's just some residual transmission fluid on the bore. We don't particularly make any effort to lubricate anything, but whatever's there is fine. You don't have to brake clean out the interior. In fact, I would highly recommend you do not squirt anything up there like that. You'll hear that sound it makes when it fully seats. So you know you're done. Reach over here and grab our filter. Now for the filter, I'm just going to take a little bit, very tiny amount, and then I'm going to wipe it off. Like a microscopic film that you can't even hardly feel, just so that it slides in better. It still should be difficult, but this will make it a little bit easier. There we go. Nice tight fit, but still no damage to the bushing where the rubber is clad on the interior. Okay, at this point, I'm going to have to reposition myself, and we're going to put the pan back on, and we'll start those bolts up. All right, so like I said, this is a late style filter. It's got some little feet. They're going to sit on the pan. We're going to bring the pan into position, try to keep the gasket lined up. We're going to run it under the shift mechanism. All right. Then we're going to try to get this bolt going on this side first. And we're going to start them in by hand. Remember, steel bolts into an aluminum case, always start by hand. Finger tight will hold everything in position. And then I'm just going to go around here, guys. Put the one in the back corner here next, just like we did before when we were removing it in this case where there was no drain plug on the pan. Just give it a little push up. Finger tighten this guy in. I know you can't see, but you saw in the front what I'm doing here. All right, so now we're just going to go on each one of these and do the same thing. Except I'm not going to run them all down by hand. That's too time consuming. I'm just going to get them started. And the reason we didn't tighten everything down is in some cases like this one, I had to push the gasket out of the way a little bit. We'll run them all down with the electric ratchet, and then we'll come back around and we'll torque them to the value I showed you earlier in the service manual. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then we'll come back when it's time to torque. All right, guys, we're just here at the back. Just checking the torque on this one that I just did. This guy here. Now these get, like we saw in the service manual, I'm making a a satisfying click, but there it is. All right, 18 foot-pounds. Come up through this access hole here to get this guy. Come up through this access hole here to get this guy. All right, so those all sounded good. Wonder why this guy just didn't sound healthy. There we go. All right. All right, so those are all torqued, all 17 of them, to 18 foot-pounds. Our drain plug bolt, this guy gets torqued to 25 foot-pounds. So I'd recommend you do the same thing with the, if you have the Torx type, with the little block of wood between the torque wrench and this guy to keep it from stripping. All right, we're ready to go up on top and start filling her up. All right, let's take a look at the service manual. We've got the 1998 unit repair manual. We're going to go over to the 4L80E section, and we're going to look at the section about the transmission filter installation. So here's just a picture of that, the filter and the bushing or the seal. Here's the pan, pointing out that you can reuse the pan gasket like I mentioned. There's no particular ordering to these 10mm bolts, but they get torqued to 18 foot-pounds. Now you notice on the picture here, this is an old drawing from the original 4L80E. There is no drain plug, like I was mentioning earlier in that shot that we showed. So they don't talk about the torque for this in this write-up. We have to actually go to the front of this, and we can see a couple other pieces of information. First of all, we can see the oil pan drain plug is 25 foot-pounds or 34 newton meters. And again, oil pan to case, 18 foot-pounds or 24 newton meters. We can see that with removal of the oil pan, she should hold approximately 7.7 quarts. Dry would be a rebuild. So 7.7 quarts should be about what we're looking at. Now, how do we go about refilling it? Well, I'm going to consult a different book for that. We're going to go to the 98 Service Manual, Volume 4. And we're going to go over here to the transmission fluid checking procedure. So start the engine, let it run for 15 minutes. We're going to use a scan tool to see that we get up to this temperature of between 180 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The fluid level is not accurate on any GM transmission until it's warm. So we got to get this up to temperature. Got to get it on a level area. You can't be on an incline on a driveway. You got to be level to do this test. With your foot in the brake, you're going to move through the gear range. This is going to cycle fluid through all of the different gears so that everything gets, all the fluid gets through the channels in the valve body, and we push all the air out. That also helps with heating everything up. We're going to let it idle for 3 minutes after we go through the cycling, and it gets to this temperature. Then we'll be able to pull the dipstick and check to see where we're at, and then keep adding to get to where we need to be. Wait a few seconds, remove it, and check it again, right? Again, there's a pro tip here. You always check both sides of the indicator, because sometimes you get splash on one side, and it might not be the actual reading. This applies to an oil dipstick as well. So on these models, you're always going to find the dipstick here in the back. There's a lock. Pops like that. If yours is busted or doesn't stay in place, I did a video a while back on these. I'll put it up in the upper right, link it to show you how to replace this and what the part number would be. So we're just going to take this guy. We're just going to wipe him off so that we don't have any spillage. Whoops. Got like a towel that doesn't want to be used here. And we're going to insert a long funnel that fits into this just perfectly. And then what we've got here is we've got a gallon of AC Delco Dexron 6 ATF. And then we've got 2 more quarts. This will give us about what we need. If not, we have some extra. So what I'm going to start with doing is adding the gallon. And then we're going to do the procedure I showed you. And then we're going to check the fluid from there, fluid level from there. And we're going to add the smaller ones as we go. So we're just going to pour this whole guy in first. Now, just in case we get a little leakage, I'm going to hold it at the base. And then we'll come back after we get to the point of warming up the engine. All right, guys, we're going to start the truck up. And for this check, we're going to need a scan tool, a bidirectional scan tool that's capable of reading the sensor that's in the transmission that indicates its temperature. So let me get this Tech 2 fired up here, and we'll show you what that looks like. So why are we having to check this? Well, if we just put in the 7.7 that we saw in the service manual, there's a good chance, a very good chance, that'll overflow it. Because in reality, between 4 and 5 quarts, in my experience, is all that you need to do on a pan drop and filter change like this. So we want to make sure we get this right, just like the service manual says. We got to have a way to read this. So as soon as we get the transmission data up here, we're going to search for the PID for the temperature. There it is, right there. Okay. Get it up here in the middle. So right now we're sitting at 62 degrees Fahrenheit, so we got a long ways to go. So we saw in there 180 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Now what the service manual doesn't indicate is that's a temperature that doesn't take into account ambient. If you were in the summertime, that was probably a good range. We're sitting here in late winter, and there's no way this is going to get up to 180 degrees in this temperature with the cooler taking that ambient air in there. So you're going to hunt for the temperature where it maxes out after that 15 minutes of activity. For this ambient temperature, which is in the 50s, I'm going to expect somewhere between 140 and 150. If I was in the summer, then I would expect 180 or more like we saw in the service manual. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to let it idle for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to try to work it through the gears like we saw in the service manual. And I'll go ahead and do that now just to show you what it was talking about. If we go up here and look on the dash, all they were suggesting was that you work it into each gear. So like reverse, 1, 2, 3, neutral, 1, 2, 3, drive, 1, 2, 3, right? 3 seconds in each one, and walk it down. And what you should be feeling for is it engaging? If you don't have enough fluid, it's not going to engage, so it's not going to move. So you walk through these. That helps get all the air purged out of the valve body and the channels inside the case. And then if you feel it engaging, then you might have enough to do the rest of this test for the last 10 minutes, right? So it says you want to have the vehicle active, and you don't want to try and take it on the highway or anything like that, but drive it around the parking lot of your shop, drive it around the building, in a neighborhood, drive it around the block. That's all you really need to do. So I can't feel it engaging in drive yet. We only put 1 gallon in that 1 gallon container. And just walking through the gears like that, we come down here, we can see we're already up to 66 degrees. So, you know, it'll start climbing up steadily, but slowly. I might go and take the 1 quart size and add a third of that until I can feel each position engaged. And when I see that it's engaging and it looks like it's going to move, we'll drive it around the block a few times and get it up to temperature. And then we'll come back. All right, guys, we've been driving around about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that. Ambient temperature, 57, 58 degrees outside here in late winter, and this has been bouncing around between 135 and 138 degrees. I think we've found our ceiling of how hot it's going to be given the outside temperature. So let's go ahead, pop under the hood, and check the level. All right, guys, while it's still hot with the engine back off again, let's go ahead and see where we are. We're going to clean everything off. And what you're looking at here, right, so you got a cold section and a hot section. Hopefully that's coming out. And we want this to be between these 2 dots. Now how much is in here? Well, I ended up, in order to make sure that everything was shifting properly, we used a little bit more than half of that 1 quart. So we've got a gallon in there, it's 4. Plus that means we're sitting somewhere north of 4.5. So you might have too much. Let's see. Yeah, we got just a little, we are sitting here, and we want to be down here. So we got to take a few ounces back out. So how do we do that when you have too many? Well, when you have too many, I use this kind of tool like this. Just run this pipe down the dipstick and pump it out. This is something you would purchase, you know, for siphoning gasoline, but I only use transmission fluid on this, so that's the only thing that's ever been in here. You can still see a little bit of residual trans fluid from the last job I did on somebody else's vehicle. So we're going to draw this down a couple ounces at a time while it's hot until we get it into the sweet spot. And I'll show you where we end up. All right, guys, I'm just taking a little bit out of here. You get like a siphon effect going, so just want to be careful how much you take out. So we'll come back down when we get it to where I think is the sweet spot. All right, guys, we've taken a few ounces out. maybe 3. Get this where it's not going to leak anywhere. We put it back in the containers because we can definitely reuse that. We don't have any significant use on it. Now let's see if we got this where we want it. Let's see where we're at now. Close enough. We might be a 1/16 of an inch above that hot mark, right? You can see where we're at, just slightly above. Unfortunately, if I try to use this technique, I might invariably pull more out than I want. So I'm going to call that done. We wanted to get this done quickly, this test here, because when she starts cooling back down, then we won't get an accurate reading. So what we ended up on this particular transmission doing is we ended up, for a filter and pan drop change, we ended up putting in 4.3 quarts to top it off. So you might wonder, why does the service manual say 7.7? Well, that's the most, and it could vary. How much is still in the torque converter, how much is all in the valve body, how much is still up into the internals of the transmission case. It's going to vary, so your mileage may vary. So that's why you do this very specific test from the service manual. Well, what if you don't have a tool that can read the temperature, or you don't have a smartphone app with one of those little Bluetooth dongles that lets you read the temperature of the transmission? Well, the backup way to do this, I would say, is measure exactly what you took out and put it back in. If you're absolutely sure you didn't spill anything, that is a semi-accurate way to at least get you back where you were. You don't know if you were low to begin with. You don't know if you were over to begin with, but that'll get you back where you were. But the way I've showed you is the correct way to do it. I hope this helped you out. If you got questions or comments on this procedure, leave them below and I'll try to help. I'll leave part numbers for the filter and the bushing that we did down in the description below. If you found this video useful and it saved you time and money and got your truck back on the road, I'd appreciate hitting that like button and pay it forward. And as always, thanks for watching.